I'm not ashamed.
What is the law of the sin offering? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on Walking Through the Bible.
Honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Leviticus chapter 6. We're going to be reading from verses 24 to 30. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus chapter 6, beginning of verse 24. Also the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, This is the law of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is killed, the sin offering shall be killed before the Lord. It is most holy. The priest who offers it for sin shall eat it. In a holy place it shall be eaten in the court of the tabernacle of meeting. Everyone who touches its flesh must be holy. And when its blood is sprinkled on any garment, you shall wash that on which it was sprinkled in a holy place. But the earthen vessel in which it is boiled shall be broken. And if it is boiled in a bronze pot, it shall be both scoured and rinsed in water. All the males among the priests may eat it. It is most holy. But no sin offering from which any of the blood is brought into the tabernacle of meeting to make atonement in the holy place shall be eaten. It shall be burned in the fire. In the last two episodes, we have had God expanding on, or at least providing more particulars of the sacrifices that we covered in chapters 1 to 5. We've already discussed the law of the burnt offering and the law of the grain offering. In today's reading, we find the law of the sin offering. If you recall from chapter 4, there were 4 different classes of people who had different instructions for this offering. One class was the priestly class. One class was the congregation as a whole. One class was the rulers of the people. And one class was the common people. Depending on which class you came from would dictate what type of animal had to be offered, what was done with the blood, and what was done with the animal after the sacrifice. For the sacrifice of the priests and the congregation as a whole, after the sacrifice of the parts God required, the rest of the animal was to be taken outside the camp and completely burned. But for the sacrifice of the rulers and the common people, chapter 4 is silent on what would happen to the animal. If the instructions weren't here in chapter 6, we might assume that the same thing would happen to those animals. But verses 24 to 30 of chapter 6 makes it clear that something else was to happen. First, we find, as we did in chapter 4, that the sin sacrifice was to be killed before the Lord because it is most holy. It wouldn't be killed in the field or in the marketplace or in the town. It would be killed in the tabernacle of meeting. Everyone who touches the flesh of it, once it is offered, must be holy. This meant that the priests were the only ones who were able to touch the flesh of the animal. What was the priest to do with the flesh? If he offered it, he was to eat it in a holy place, that is, the tabernacle of meeting. Again, like the grain offering, no leftovers were to be taken home to share with the wife and kids. This was a holy sacrifice, a sin sacrifice that was holy to the Lord, therefore only the male priests could partake of it. Just as God had done in other areas, this is God caring for the priests who sacrificed and served in the temple. They wouldn't have farms to return to. They wouldn't have other jobs to do. Their job was in service to the Lord, and so the Lord provided for them. There were stipulations, though, on what would happen to the dishes that they ate of the sacrifices in. If the vessels were made of the earth, like clay dish, the dish was to be broken. Whereas if the vessel was made of bronze, it was to be scoured and rinsed with water. Why? Well, the clue is found in the dealing with the bronze dish. The sacrifice itself was holy, and the clean dish was therefore holy. But after the dish was used, it was no longer clean, and so it wasn't to be used again in that condition, because it would be not holy. If the holy touched the unholy, that which was holy would now be unholy. So the bronze dish had to be thoroughly washed. Why did the earthen dish have to be broken? Because earthenware would absorb some of the juices from the meat, and therefore couldn't be cleansed with water, and therefore would now be unholy forever. So that dish would need to be broken. As part of the sin sacrifice, blood would have to be sprinkled on the altar and poured out at the base. Invariably, though, once in a while, blood might get on the priest's clothing. What was to be done then? In a holy place, the garment was to be washed. The priests were not to serve the Lord in dirty garments. However, because they were the priest's garments, they couldn't be taken out to the river to be cleaned. They needed to be cleaned in the tabernacle of meeting. Due to the inconvenience of having to do this, should have caused the priest to be careful with the blood. So the priest could eat of the sacrifices of the rulers and the common people. What about the other two sacrifices? The sacrifice of the bull. Because that blood was sprinkled in the tabernacle itself before the veil of the sanctuary, that animal was not to be eaten of, but to be completely burned. So even though God provided for the priests, he did restrict their use of the meat of the sin sacrifice in some regards. We'll take up with the law of the trespass offering, the Lord willing, in the next episode. With that, our time is up for today. We'll be taking our 2-week winter break and will return, the Lord willing, on Monday, February 24th, 2020. When we return, we will take up with Leviticus chapter 7, verses 1 to 10. We hope you'll come back and join us in that discussion when we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.